It was in a time when cricketers got very little remuneration. In fact, we were way below the standard that any sportsman would earn. We weren't even matching the footballers at the time. A lot of things were happening in the game. There was the introduction of one-day cricket. We had the Gillette Cup at that time, but there was talk now of a Sunday League. Benson and Hedges have come in, and it meant that if these things took place and the players had no representation in discussing their position regarding them, then we would be going backwards.
And it was thanks to Fred Rumsey, in fact, who went round all the counties in 1967, and he played for 3 counties, and he sought the views of everybody and said we should be the equivalent of the PFA.
I wrote a letter to all the first-class counties. In those days there were 17, to the secretary and to the senior pro. And the letter outlined why I felt that an association was required. I knew I'd get some opposition. Lord Cobham once referred to the national government as a bunch of commies compared to the MCC committees. The chairman of my cricket club, Bunty Longrig, who was a former player, got some pressure from people at Lord's to bring pressure upon me. And he asked me out for dinner during a game at Bath, and we went to his club, and the moment I arrived, he said, "Look, let's get this other matter out of the way. I have been approached by members at Lord's to bring pressure on you to stop this union." So I said, "Oh, what did you say, Mr. Longridge?" He said, "I left them in no doubt as to how I felt, and told them that under no circumstances would the club or I bring pressure on you. We would do exactly the reverse. We will encourage you to form the union, and you've got my total backing," which to me was great.
It was always a fight against the authorities, but over a period of time they began to appreciate that our interest was also in the furtherance of cricket.
And looking back now, I'm amazed at how many were opposed to forming what was then called a Cricketers' Union. And it was, I'm not joining this, I'm not. Of course, it was seen as a left-wing upstart, rebellious. And of course, it was never that at all.
The idea of the association wasn't so much militant as it was representative. The players needed to have a say in what was going on. And the letter outlined the fact that we were behind the national average in earnings, that there was need for some form of employment exchange in the winter, so that our summer contracts weren't just the only thing we were going to earn in the year. There was a need for good insurance cover, because we used to have to arrange our own, and it varied from virtually nothing to a lot of money. At the time, John Davis, a Daily Express reporter, worked in the West Country, and he knew I wanted to arrange a big meeting, preferably in London. And so he had words with his paper, and they offered to sponsor it. Well, I had no money at that time, and so it made sense. So the first ever meeting was held at the Press Club in Fleet Street. And that first meeting was chaired by Jim Parks, who was a England wicketkeeper come batsman. And although he chaired that meeting, he had made it clear to me he didn't want to continue as chairman.
And we were addressed by the PFA representative, Jimmy Hill, who was chairman, and Cliff Lloyd, who was the secretary.
Fred Rumsey set out the objectives as being that the players should have a voice, which they didn't have in the past.
We had the whole of the country cricket behind us. And after the address by Jimmy Hill, we went into private session and formed the association. In my planning days, it was called the County Cricketers Association. It was the first part that the committee didn't like the county bit. They kicked it out and we became the Cricketers Association.
And they wanted somebody to help them keep books of account. Not that there was any money at that time. John Arlott asked me if I would do it, which I said I would, and I said I'd do it for 3 years without charge to help them get on their feet, because I liked the whole idea of the cricketers having a stronger voice than they'd ever had in the past.
I was elected treasurer. Roger Prideaux of Kent and Northampton was elected chairman, and between then and the start of the '68 season, Northampton told Roger Prideaux, who was their captain, we don't want you to have anything to do with the union, so he resigned, so I became chairman.
Which was the greatest thing they could possibly have done, because his contribution was quite enormous. He was a perfect man for the job.
Finished at the end of '69 and became secretary. So I've done everything really, and then I suppose the guiding light behind the whole affair was our president, John Arlott, and it was interesting how he came to be elected, because at the first meeting to elect a president, all sorts of names were put forward. The late Peter May, the Duke of Edinburgh, if you please, and everybody, and Don Shepherd of Glamorgan suddenly put his hand up and said, look, we want a man who we know loves cricket, and therefore John Arlott was the suggestion.
And I had to go down and ask him, and it was a very interesting meeting, because not only was it alcoholic, it was also emotional. He could not believe that the players of England wanted him as their president, and with that attitude, I had no doubts that he would make a great one.
For 4 years he'd been desperately trying to get on the Hampshire committee, and he got on, and he immediately resigned, because in case there was any conflict of interest between players and the clubs. So it was John Arlott who was instrumental in guiding us through the '70s.
And he was there for many years.